again, this time we're talking about lipids, which we normally call fats. But the fancy name, the word we're going to be using is lipids. Okay, the function of a lipid, lots of them, not just to make you fat, but insulation helps keep you warm, which is why I have the air on all the time in my classroom, because I'm extra insulated, you're not. I need the extra air conditioning. Protection, protects your organs from withstanding damage, stores excess energy, helps to make your cell membranes, helps to waterproof parts of you, also bugs too, and also helps to synthesize hormones. Structure of lipids is that they contain only carbon, that's a C, and hydrogen. Examples of lipids would be things like fats, waxes, and oils. Like all that yummy goodness right there. Alright, let's see, what are they made out of? Well, there's two main things that we see in a lipid. One of them is called glycerol. Glycerol is made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So this right here is a glycerol molecule. And where the OHs are, that is kind of like a little hand. And so you can see it can grab onto three different things, and that'll be important in just a little bit. It's also made of something called a fatty acid, which is just a big old long chain of carbon and hydrogen. And so right here, in this little structure right here, this is a carboxyl, which is also the glycerol. And then this big tail right here, which it doesn't look like much, each of these corners is a carbon. Carbon, 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 and there's little H's hanging off of them. And so what we end up with is something that looks like this. Glycerol and big old wiggly fatty acid chain. Glycerol, fatty acid chain. Okay? Now let's take a look at how they're joined together. Lipids are made by joining together the glycerol and the fatty acids. This one right here is called a phospholipid. This one is super duper important because this is the one that makes cell membranes. I don't know why my pen keeps on doing this. Okay. Phospholipids make up our cell membranes, and you can see here's the glycerol head. They also call it the polar region. If you remember what the word polar means, it means it has a charge to it. And then here's the tails, and notice they've got little kinks in them. That'll become important later. But you can see all the C's and H's right here. Those are the fatty acid tails. So here it is again. Here's the glycerol, and here's the fatty acids. Here's the glycerol, here's the fatty acids. Okay? If they have two tails, we call it a phospholipid. If they have three or one tail, we give them different names. We'll take a look at those in a second. Okay, types of fatty acid chains. Okay, so the little tails. So in my ping pong ball with the little tails, we're referring to these parts. Those are the fatty acids. There's lots of different types of fatty acids, excuse me, depending on how they look. So the first one we do is we call saturated. You've probably heard of saturated fats before. What that means is that the carbons, which are the black dots right here, are held together completely by single bonds, and all the rest of the things hanging off are hydrogens. So they're all single bonds between the carbons. If it's unsaturated, that just means that there's a couple of double bonds. A double bond means is that they removed the hydrogens and instead put an extra bond in between the carbons, okay? So we've lost some hydrogens, and we got double bonds in there. So we call that guy unsaturated, so unsaturated fats. Then we have something called polyunsaturated. Poly we know means lots of, so lots of unsaturatedness, if that's a word. So lots of double bonds, so there's one, so you can see not as many hydrogens.
Mom,
What?
are you even watching?
No. So polyunsaturated, dear Lord, here. There. So polyunsaturated just means lots of double bonds in there. Now what happens is that the fatty acids, when they're saturated, they make straight chains. When they're unsaturated, everywhere there's a double bond, it goes kink, like that. So if there's one with lots of double bonds in it, kink, 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 like that. So you can tell if a fatty acid is saturated or not saturated based on the shape of the tail. Okay, what's the difference between fats and oils? Well, fats are those that are usually solid at room temperature, like butter, and that's because they are saturated. So all the tails are perfectly lined up, and so they pack close, tightly together, which is what makes them solid. Things like butter, cream, cheese, and certain meats are fat, and they're not as healthy, as opposed to oils, which are liquid at room temperature because they're mostly unsaturated. So what happens is, since the tails are all kind of crazy psycho going in all sorts of different directions, they can't line up nice and tight and closely packed, and so that prevents them from solidifying, and so they stay liquid. These are relatively healthier for you because these are the ones that are found in vegetable oils and seeds, so like olive oil and canola oil, things like that. So it doesn't mean you should down this whole entire jug of it, but if I were to choose, I should probably cook my chicken in oil as opposed to butter. Alright, how do I turn fats that are unsaturated like this, how do I turn them into saturated? Because why do we do that? Why do we do that? If it's not as healthy for you, why do we do that to our food? Well, it adds flavor. And people who are not concerned about the food they eat like flavor, and so they look for something what is called partially hydrogenated soybean oil. You've probably seen that on packages of food. That just means that they've taken relatively good fats and they threw extra hydrogens on them in the process of hydrogenation. Hydrogenation is where I just basically chuck hydrogens at them from all different angles, and that breaks these little bonds, and then when the bond is broken, I'm going to need some extra hydrogens to hang on. Well, here they come. And so by adding these extra hydrogens in it, it makes it into a straight line again. And so it gets rid of all my double and triple bonds, and it makes it perfectly straight again, or with not so many double bonds, and it adds flavor to the food. So if you ever see partially hydrogenated soybean oil, that's what it is. They've taken a perfectly good fat and turned it into a bad fat because it makes the food taste better. So next time you're eating, just do me a favor, look at the label and see if you find this. I bet you it's probably one of the first couple of ingredients. So hydrogenation is the process of bombarding unsaturated fatty acids with hydrogen atoms to break the bonds and turn them into saturated fats. Alright, that's it for fats and lipids. Not a whole lot to do on this one. And then the next time we take notes, it'll be on nucleic acids, which is DNA and things like that. So we'll see you next time. Bye.